justice. I'm joined now by Professor Chaloka Beyani, one of the investigators of the mission. Professor, thanks so much for speaking to us. Now, give me a sense of what some of the key takeaways were from the 3 years that you've spent considering the human rights situation in Libya.
It's a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you very much. Some of them you've highlighted already. Throughout the course of our investigations, we have found obviously patterns of crimes against humanity, torture, forced disappearances, detention of migrants in particular. But the highlights of this report are enslavement, especially sexual slavery and forced labor.
And what are the conditions that have led to such an array of human rights violations?
Contestation for power between different militia groups, the question of dissent and suppression in relation to those who challenge the militias and the de facto authorities, denial of the right to self-determination and public participation of Libyan people.
You mentioned earlier that migrants were of particular concern. How so?
Because of the fact that Libya is a country of transit for migrants from West Africa, East Africa, from Afghanistan, and the Mediterranean is a gateway to Europe. And therefore, there's also a policy of interception in Libyan waters and pushbacks back to Libya. And so detention, trafficking migrants is big business in Libya. It's an entrepreneurial project.
And so there were countless abuses against individuals that were documented. Is this just a systemic but haphazard fallout from political and social chaos in an unstable country? Or did you also form an opinion on whether there was any wider, deliberately strategic campaign against human rights in Libya?
There's a wider systematic campaign against human rights in Libya. And what we discovered perhaps is just the tip of the iceberg. Libyans live under a whole threat to their lives, to their fundamental freedoms, and in particular women, not just because of patriarchy, but women are discouraged from participating in political life. We have identified the killings of women, in particular Hanan Barassi, who was killed in 2022, the murder of an MP as well, Sihem Sagiwa.
So what, Professor, are your recommendations? What happens after you present your findings to the Human Rights Council on Friday?
The findings include the preservation of evidence in terms of accountability and responsibility. We have identified a list of individuals who are responsible and should be held accountable for this. But we have also recommended that there be a further mechanism to establish by the international community, notably the Human Rights Council or the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And as we speak, I think there's a draft resolution suggesting to establish another mechanism in order to ensure that monitoring human rights violations in Libya is on the spotlight.
Thank you so much, Professor Chaloka Beyani. They're one of the investigators to the fact-finding mission in Libya that's due to release its findings to the Human Rights Council this Friday.